You know when you try to maybe get to know someone, but you just can't really figure them out in a particular way. I mean, every time you break down a layer of their personality or something about them, you find something underneath that doesn't seem to add up with what was on the other layer. It's kind of like pass the parcel, where you unwrap a layer of the wrapping paper, and the wrapping paper on the outer layer does not match the wrapping on the inner layer at all. Okay, maybe not the best example, but I think you see my point. When I originally met Commander Spax, I thought he was just some stuck-up commanding arsehole. Then I thought he was some angry brute, willing to bend and even break laws to get the job done. I then felt a lot of resentment between me and him, until eventually I thought we had an understanding of each other, at least some loose one. The fact that even though we are very different, that we were still working towards maybe the same goal, or that both our hearts were in the right place, or something along those lines. But now it felt I was back at square one. Everything that I'd maybe learnt to appreciate about him was just thrown out the window. Mind, I'm only thinking about these things in hindsight. To be honest, at the time when someone is pointing a gun at you, you generally, the only thing that's going through your mind is, how do I stop him from killing me? How do I avoid not dying in this situation? So you'll, I hope, forgive me for not really thinking much of anything else or outside the box or anything in that situation. You know, it's a very stressful time. It's like watching reality game shows and that, where people are put to the absolute limits and you're at home going, oh, they should have done this, they should have done that, oh, that answer was obvious. When you're there in the moment, the stress in your mind kind of blinds you. You can't think clearly. All the thoughts and ideas in your mind are going at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you just can't keep up with them. When you're stressed or have anxiety and that, you just can't think clearly. Nothing seems to be clear in your head anymore. And in that moment of stress, there's only one thing that goes through your head. Trying to get out of the stress, trying to stop being stressed. But because thinking of ways to try and get out of being stressed makes you more stressed, then you seem to be just more stressed about thinking about trying to stop being stressed, which can then lead to panic attacks. Though in my situation, I don't think a panic attack would have been the best idea. Obviously you can't control a panic attack, though there are several ways to go about preventing one. Like again, for example, trying to keep calm and trying to think clearly, although then again, in situations like that, you know, any situation where you feel stressed or feel like a panic attack is about to come on, the only thing in your mind is trying to prevent it. But the stress and anxiety of trying to prevent something can maybe bring something on even harder than it was before. But hey, maybe I've gone on enough about that for now. I don't want to stress or cause panic attacks for any of my lovely listeners, would I? Well, at least not this early into the podcast. So anyway, there was Commander Spax pointing a gun at me, and to be honest, I thought that was it. I thought this was going to be my final moment. However, then he smiled, and then slightly lowered the gun. He was still pointing at me, but it was more in a casual rather than a stern pointing, aiming to shoot. He told us that Muckendry himself had requested that all three of us live, and were not to be harmed. He then went on to say that the three of us would accompany him to the morgue, to revive Spiz Muckendry. He followed this statement up with, I may not be able to harm you, but I could harm the people on this base. There are explosives planted all over here, and I can activate them from here. So the three of you better keep quiet and follow me. I hope that's made clear and very thoroughly understood by the three of you. The three of us nodded in agreement. We then made our way down to the morgue, trying to look as natural as possible. Although when you do try and look as natural as possible when you're walking, it generally looks unnatural because you focus on looking natural, although the fact that that's going through your head, you look unnatural. Luckily though, the people of this USP station had the magical art of not giving a shit. There could be a clown going by on a unicycle throwing pies at people, and none of the staff of USP would even raise an eyebrow at that. Well, maybe if one of the pies hit them, I guess. But otherwise it would be just one of those things that would pass them by without a second glance. We'd finally made it down to the morgue. Spax gave a nod to the mortician, who also seemed to be in league with Muckendry. The mortician pulled out the body of Muckendry. It still to me looked completely as lifeless as it had the last time I'd seen it. But all of that was about to change. Commander Spax inserted the needles into Muckendry's neck. He then pushed a button on the device, and the device itself seemed to act a bit like a taser, sending what appeared to be an electrical charge into Muckendry. His whole body shook and twitched for a moment. Then, slowly, Muckendry began to open his eyes. He was now back from the dead. Muckendry then sat up from his slab and turned to Commander Spats.
Well done, Spats. My revival has gone completely according to plan.
And what is the full extent of your plan, I asked?
Mr. Doncaster, you seem a lot more confident in yourself now than you did before. Have we gotten even more rebellious against our orders from our commander than we did before?
What?
I see you don't fully understand. You see,
he said, removing the device from his neck.
This device does not just revive me, but it also gives me all the necessary information of current events. The reports of all your journeys and missions have been entered by your lovely Commander Spax himself through a wireless network.
Why do you want us alive? Asked Tom.
You three are different from the rest of these bloody idiots. We have similarities, you know. Especially you and I, Mr. Doncaster.
I sincerely doubt that, I stated in a form of resentment towards him.
I know that you felt betrayed by your commander, but honestly, you'll get to see things much clearly shortly. I mean, I would love to have a nice conversation with you, and I will. I just don't have the time quite yet.
Muckendry then turned to Commander Spax and nodded at him. Spax then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal device. It looked a bit like an elongated lipstick. Spax twisted one of the ends, then slapped his hand on the centre of the tube, then slowly sliding his hand along it. There revealed a button, which he then proceeded to press. We then heard 4 extremely loud bangs simultaneously as the whole station shook. It knocked me to the floor, and it knocked Tom into Billy, who was thankfully able to keep his balance. Obviously it only took microseconds to realise what had happened. Spax had set off those explosives he was talking about around the base. When the shaking began to calm down, myself up to my feet, grabbing Commander Spax by his uniform round his chest area.
You fucking... You just killed... How many people did you just kill? Do you even know? Do you even care, you bastard?
He tilted his head slightly to the side and just smiled.
Not really. Considering they're all going to die anyway, what's the point of caring if a few die now when they're all going to die later?
I then threw him to the ground, and I began to sink my claws into his face. As he screamed out in pain and agony, it only encouraged me to sink my claws deeper into him. I wanted him to feel all the pain and suffering that could possibly even ever be imagined of.
enough of this, Mr. Doncaster.
In the rush of everything that was happening, I'd forgotten about Muckendry. He had now stood up and casually walked over to me. In doing so, it showed that he had little to no regard of whether Spax lived or died, or whether he was in pain or not. Looking back, I guess this would be some sort of revelation. One of the reasons why I might have felt sorry for Muckendry, other than clearly having some similarities between me and him, is that he didn't seem to want to hurt people in any way, at least not physically, and would rather not have someone tortured or killed if it was easily preventable. Yet here I was, torturing one of his own, someone who was loyal to him and who had clearly worked for him for quite a while. It sort of proved to me that, while on the surface he might want to appear as if he has morals or some sort of code, or that he does care in some way about not hurting people or people's safety, in reality, he clearly doesn't. He doesn't care at all. I thought maybe he was giving maybe just a bit misunderstood, but no. He was just a heartless bastard like the rest of them.
I will not ask again. That is enough, Mr. Doncaster. We have much to discuss. And while I think it's perfectly reasonable and perfectly fair for you to have a bit of well-earned revenge on your Commander Spax, now I think you have done enough.
I was breathing heavily. But I did release Commander Spax. As I got up, I licked the blood off my fingers, and then, looking Commander Spax in the eye, "Your blood is as bitter as you are." Commander Spax then proceeded to faint. Muckendry then turned to the mortician.
"Patch up Muckendry's face before he bleeds to death. It is so hard to get the staff these days, especially ones who are as loyal as him."
"And why did you let it happen then? If he was so loyal to you, why?"
"I felt it was only fair that you get some vengeance out of you. I didn't want all that anger and resentment bubbling up inside you when we talked."
"Talked? What the fuck are we gonna talk about?"
"Many, many things."
"And what about my friends?"
"I may not have the same personal discussion with them as I do with you, but do not worry. They will be perfectly fine. All three of you are coming with me, off this backwater base and back to somewhere much, much more civilized. I can tell you that. But we must hurry. The engines will soon fully give out, and this station will crash and burn."
"But why? Why kill everyone on here? Some of them don't even know who the hell you are. Most of them have nothing to do with you. Why are you killing them?"
"They all arrogant, all self-righteous. Or at least they pretend to be. They're all self-centered, not caring at all. You know why most people here joined USP? Wasn't for a sense of morality or justice. They just wanted to beat the ever-living shit out of people. And it wasn't a way of dealing with anger or something repressed like that. No, it was just for sheer enjoyment and amusement. And these are the people that you want to save."
"It's not the same here now. I've changed things." I looked over to Billy and Tom. "We've changed things. Things are different here now. They were all corrupt, horrible bastards before, but I'm trying to make them better."
"I'll give you that. You are trying, but, well, a leopard can't change its spots, can it? Try all you like. They won't truly change. They might put a nice act on the surface, though really, you know, under that layer, that they're the still same despicable people that they were beforehand." Except now they seem even worse, because they're trying to put on this facade that they're all caring and fair and outrageous and justice and all that stuff. But really, we both know that they are worse than ever before. We don't have time to argue here.
Spax then turned to the Megtech, who was busy bandaging up Spax's face. Muckendry then asked the Megtech,
Teleport link then? Is it established? Is it ready?
The mortician nodded. Muckendry then smiled.
Then activate it.
Then, in a flash, me, Billy, Tom, and Muckendry were all beamed up to a nearby shuttle that had apparently been waiting for this very moment. Once on board, Muckendry turned to the pilot.
Begin our set course.
The pilot then nodded, and we began to fly away from the USP station, leaving the rest of them to die. After travelling in space for about 15 minutes, we suddenly came to a halt. Spiz Muckendry then turned to the pilot again.
Open the communications link.
The pilot again nodded and flicked a switch.
Open force field barrier. Code Zema 482.
Then, what could only be described as a garage door opening was what looked to be a doorway through a force field, which is why we appeared to have stopped in the middle of space. Muckendry then turned to face the three of us.
I know a cloaking force field might seem a bit much, but you can never be too careful.
As he said this, we entered through the force field. I could see that it was some rusty old space station that, at least on first glance, looked like it was surprising enough that it was able to stay in flight. But Muckendry assured us,
it might look scratched and banged up on the outside, but believe me, it's just a facade. Call it a second precaution. See, if the cloaking shield was to ever fail, then people are hardly likely to go looking to steal from something that looks as crap as this.
I then finally spoke. Why have you taken us here?
Ah, good, I see you've calmed down a bit.
Don't push it.
I will answer all your questions in good time. For now, there is something I wish to show you.
And with that, we docked at the station. Upon arriving, we were greeted with two guards. Muckendry instructed that Tom and Billy be escorted to the rest area, and were to be treated as honoured guests. Meanwhile, I was to come with him. You'd think, maybe, looking at this from a retrospective part, that maybe I should have tried something on Muckendry. Maybe I should have, tried to take him down or something, especially when we were on that ship. Though, to be honest, what was going through my mind is, wherever Muckendry takes us, it's going to be of some importance. And hey, maybe if I can find out some more information, maybe I can get him taken down for good. That was the only thing really going through my head at the time. To at least try and find some way to avenge the people who had died because of him, and the people that were more than likely going to die because of him, and he was just going to sit there not even acknowledging it anymore. In fact, he seemed to be more interested in impressing us than anything else at this moment. It disgusted me, the fact that USP's base's inevitable destruction just seemed to slip his mind. Like it was just a secondary thing to him, not the main importance, not his main goal. Anyway, regardless of that fact, he led me to what he called
my Voltoom.
Sorry, still not getting it. What's that? And please pretend if I actually care.
I think you will once you see what's inside.
He stepped forward as a machine scanned his entire body, as well as taking a DNA sample from inside his mouth. Then, these massive bulkhead doors opened.
Walk with me, Donfrey, if I might call you that.
Why should it matter to you? Nothing else you've done seems to. You seem to forget that thousands and thousands of people on the USP station are just about to die. And, I mean, at least if you're a cackling villain, at least I could understand that, but you seem to completely have forgotten about it.
That's just business. This is a lot more personal.
Regrettably, I followed him. This place was like a large treasure room with glass cabinets. Some of the exhibits, I'm going to call them, I passed were something called a smelloscope, which sounds utterly disgusting, a VHS of some 90s TV show called Horsing Around, some sort of antimatter bomb, which, to be honest, I didn't even want to dare asking whether it was still active or not. A device that looked a bit like a barcode scanner, with what looked like the bottom of a green test tube glued to the top of it, and then a piece of what looked like broken metal with hemispheres on it, with what looked to be a silver plunger lying next to it. For a second I thought that surely the plumber shouldn't have left his stuff there, though to be honest, looking at it, it was tarnished metal just like the piece of metal with the hemispheres on it, so I assumed it was part of the same thing. I then finally reached a flight of stairs that was in the centre of the room, that Muckendry had already ascended and was standing at the top.
You asked what my vault room was? Well, I hope you can make an educated guess.
Oh God, no. It's an amalgamation between the words tomb and vault, isn't it?
Correct. Whilst I'm alive, this is my vault. But when I die, it shall be my tomb.
But why are you showing me all this? I mean, what kind of the point? What is your sick point at the end of this?
All right. I think it's time I finally started answering some questions.
Yes, please do. I've been waiting long enough, don't you think?
You see, you and me are similar. We both don't want to be forgotten when we die. And throughout we want to try and live as long as possible to achieve that goal. Well, what if I said that you could gain immortality?
Easy, I would say you are mad, although I think I already gathered that.
Not a physical immortality, but the next best thing. You see, if you establish a sort of legacy about you, something to be remembered that people will remember, then you can never truly be dead, because you will never be forgotten. The moment that you are forgotten, then you are truly dead. The world has just forgotten you and moved on without you. But with this, with my followers continuing on what I represented without me, then I will truly live forever. Though I did realize that some of them may deviate from my legacy and not withhold what I stood for and keep my name alive. Which is why I decided that I needed a successor.
He then gestured his arm out at me. You're fucking insane. You think I... The only thing I can do now is just laugh at your lunacy. That is the only thing I have got left now. The only thing I can do is just laugh at it. Because there's nothing else left.
You say that, but in time, you will change your mind. I ought to thank you now. You have been very useful to me. Thanks to you, I gained access to USP's base by insisting that I'd be put in the mortuary and not just tossed aside.
What do you mean?
All of this, Donfrey, all of this. It took a lot of planning, in a very short amount of time. I realized very quickly when Spax told me of your arrival at USP that you would be the perfect successor. I then decided to put out all the information about me wanting to steal that painting, yada yada. And all those priceless pieces of artwork, giving USP little tips and trinkets, and then instructing them at a later date to attempt to rob that museum. However, their only real instruction was to give Commander Spax the code to unlocking my box so that I could be revived at a later date.
But it's been 3 months. You've been like that for 3 months. Why'd you wait so long?
You are new and inexperienced of handling how the real world is out here. I wanted you to get a feel of what the criminals and that are like here. Believe me, they're nowhere near as kind or as generous as I am. Most of them are pathetic brutes who will just kill you and ask questions never. They don't appreciate the finer things like this.
Finally, I managed to get him rabbiting on, because in the corner of my eye I spotted an exhibit that was actually labelled Vintage Laser Gun. You see, when he was talking, he seemed to get pretty distracted, and seemed to constantly look around his trophy room. This then gave me the ideal opportunity. I darted over to the laser gun. I smashed the glass case. This obviously got Muckendry's attention.
What are you doing?
Order that Tom and Billy to be taken to the landing bay right now, and for a shuttle to us to leave.
But do it!
Unless you want this place to become your tomb today. Muckendry turned on his communicator and gave the order. I then slowly walked backwards, passing through the bulkhead doors, keeping my eye on Muckendry, but also on the antimatter bomb. Order these bulkhead doors to be closed.
You will do it!
And, as the doors began to close, I shot at the antimatter bomb. I didn't know whether it would kill me, Billy and Tom all at once, or just this room, but I didn't care. I was hoping the bulkhead doors might stop it. So for the few seconds I could see before the bulkhead doors fully closed, it seemed to just set fire to the entire room. As I left, I could hear Muckendry screaming,
You'll know you'll die and be forgotten like me, Doncaster. You know you will.
As I made it to the landing bay, Billy and Tom were already there. Thankfully, the guards were stood on the other side of the room. I shouted to them, Board the shuttle! Now! Come on, we gotta get out here! Obviously, this alerted the guards and they began to make their way towards us. But by this point, they'd already made takeoff. We managed to get through the gap in the force field before they closed it again, and made our way back to the USP station. At least out of everything today, the one good thing, or one sigh of relief, was that USP's mutual benefactor, that hybrid mind thing, had gotten its best technicians to repair the damage, so that the station could still remain afloat. When we arrived, we were informed of the death count. Out of the estimated 10,000 people on the station, 432 of them have been accounted as deceased. A further 208 people were injured, though thankfully the rest of them seemed to be fine. Commander Spax and anyone else who was suspected of being in league with Muckendry was arrested. All three of us gave details on where his base was, his station, but we realised that he most likely would have moved it by now. It's taken about a month to get everything back to the way it was before, but we made it. Everything seems to be, at least roughly, back to how it was. And well, here I am all up to date on that, on my podcast. Anyway, at least I've got something to look forward to. The Christmas party and that's supposedly going to be good. They've even asked me, Billy and Tom, to perform a few songs. So, that'll be good. But anyway. Thank you. So, just got a letter here. Dear Donfrey, see you at the Christmas party. Signed, Dorothy.